Sponsor an orphan, and you'll help support a vulnerable child to have the education they've always dreamed of, so they can build a brighter future. You'll be feeding a hungry stomach and a hungry mind with knowledge that will last them a lifetime. That's the power of an education. Sponsor an orphan now with Islamic Relief.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. This is your brother Preacher Moss. I hope everything is going well. Welcome to our show, the Shout Out Show. I am your host. Listen, I hope everybody is doing two things. Number one, I hope you're doing well, you're blessed. Number two, I hope that you're staying cool. We are in the midst of some major climate change issues. Of course, I'm talking in terms of the heat. I'm talking in terms of wildfire. I'm talking in terms of the reality is that the economy, not the economy, but the environment and the economy do have some type of not religious, but there's a relationship there. And today I thought it would be interesting. We really, talked a little about that, climate control, why it's important. So today's topic is called Damn It's Hot. Why is climate control important? Damn It's Hot. Why is climate control important? Let me break something down to you. As a person who spent a lot of years, my early years, traveling around the United States, doing gigs here, there, everywhere from Seattle all the way down to North Carolina to the Midwest, and have been essentially a person that's traveled around the country, and I've experienced different climates. Now, I understand the whole aspect of hot, and I'm no prude. And I feel like, hey, man, when it gets late May, into June, into July, August, these are hot months. These were hot months for me when I was a kid. I don't know about you, but these were hot months for me when I was a kid. What we have now, though, is there's a reckoning that's happening. And what I mean by the reckoning is it's the idea that we saw things happening along the way. We had opportunities to do things about it, and now we're suffering. So the whole idea is damn it's hot. It really is almost a metaphor. Is damn it's late. Damn we didn't listen. Damn we didn't act on these things. Damn we let people talk us out of our positions. Because there's a report out. I was just reading it, just talking about climate control of African Americans. Now, if you're talking about climate control of African Americans, you're talking about other people of color. African Americans do not operate in a vacuum. They say African Americans, but it is really a bellwether to let everybody else know who's not white that these things are possibly happening in your area. So climate control with African Americans could simply be climate control with Latinos, climate control with the poor, climate control with homeless. You have all of these different pockets of people who need support. They need programs. They need pathways. The better life, better health. Let me tell you what the impetus is of a ghetto. Because we always talk about the hood, but we don't talk about the ghetto anymore. Back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, we talked about the ghetto. Now we're talking about the hood. Well, see, the ghetto is different. You see, because the ghetto had certain political ramifications. You see, the ghetto was a political ramification because people were trying to get out of the ghetto. They didn't celebrate ghetto life. If you were in a ghetto, it was a motivation for you to get out of a ghetto. If there was high crime, poor education, poor opportunities for jobs, you were trying to get out of that situation. Because the thing they didn't talk about was the climate that came along with the ghetto. We're talking about police brutality. We're talking about drugs. We're talking about prostitution. That was the climate, brothers and sisters. And the thing that we really didn't talk about, even more so, was what were the living conditions going back to the 50s, 60s, and 70s? You see, we forget. Just because you could put an air conditioning unit in a window does not make a ghetto middle class. No. It makes a unit in a ghetto that's probably either going to fall out of the window or somebody's going to steal the damn thing. That was the way it was in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. In the 80s, with the crack and all that type of stuff, we moved away from the people who were, if you were, guardians of these low-income spaces, but they still managed, listen to me now, they still managed to make successful entrees into middle class, education, business. We don't have that anymore. So when we talk about climate control, you are looking at a situation, for lack of a better word, whereby we've overlooked a lot of things. We're going to be talking about that and more here on the Shout Out Show. Our topic today is Damn It's Hot, Why Climate Control is Important. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. Before we get started on our topic today, let's go ahead and give some love and some love, and some shine to everybody in the comment section. Our Shout Out Show family, our Shout Out Soul soldiers. Of course, we have the undoubtable. We have Sister Ree. Ree, how you doing? We hope you're doing well. Hope that you are surviving in the Houston heat. We're talking about 99, 100, 101, 102. And I'm going to talk about this weather too a little bit, folks, because I'm going to give you some things that they don't talk about in terms of climate control, because we think it's all happening in our area. You know, you got to look around the world to really talk about this stuff. Rhea, I hope you're doing well. Hope you got your feedback underneath you. You got some rest, peace, and blessings to you, Derek and Juwan. Next up, we got my main man, Mr. 6 o'clock, Altaf Rashid. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullah barakatuh. What's going on? I hope you're doing. How is the weather in Toronto, man? I got news that it gotten kind of salty up in Toronto. It was a little hot there. Let me know. Toronto is not a spot that really gets crazy hot, but the last couple of years they've been dealing with it just like we've been dealing with it down here. So let us know what that temperature looks like, Altaf, and we want you to do it in your official capacity as the Canadian envoy to the show. Now you're the Canadian envoy and meteorologist. All right, appreciate you. Shout out to my main man, Brother Eric Carter. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullah barakatuh. Wherever you are, in the city, man, I hope you're cool. Nice to see you on the program, man. We're going to go ahead and rock this one off, because guess what? I can't be using too much electricity where I am, because we might fall off the doggone grid. So let's talk climate control. Here are the things they're not telling you about climate control that you should be aware of. If you're in areas whereby there is a large population, I'm going to give a salam. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullah barakatuh. Brother Bilal and Sister Sonia, hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me break this down a little bit. People think that climate control, if you look at the politics of how it's discussed, particularly in the United States, it's really fashioned on this thing that we have climates that are affecting our climates. Let me say it again. We have climates, we have pollution that's affecting our climate. It's not the other way around. What I mean is we are one of the biggest polluters in the world. We contribute a lot of course, a lot of pollution to the world. And it shouldn't be anything. If you look at some of the accords that were taken out in terms of executive orders of Donald Trump, he basically gutted everything we were doing in terms of climate control. The Kyoto Accord, all these type of things, where you had agreements with countries to work on reducing greenhouse gases. We've been out of that for a minute. You know, I don't even know if Joe Biden's even gotten into it. But here's the thing I think you should really understand. To me, climate control is local. Climate control is local. You can go around and look at some of the ordinances in your particular area. What I mean is you got to do a little homework. Look at some of the ordinances that have been passed that allow for pollution, and I want to say muddying up of the climate to persist, whereby you may have dumping, whereby you may have aspects of trash not being cleaned up, whereby you have aspects of water. And here's a big one. Know your water rights wherever you live. Know your water rights. You know, in the city of Houston, city of Texas, 2021, they had a situation where in the coldest part of the year, in January, in an unexpected cold, people damn near froze. That people died in the state of Texas because they ran out of electricity. Little did they know was the person who was supposed to be controlling the electrical grid was not even a person who lived in Texas. The guy lived in Michigan. And what happened was the deregulation of the grid. Texas didn't want to be a part of the national grid. So the deregulation of the grid becomes full force and fully apparent that we don't have enough electricity. What was rolled out in the wintertime as a brownout, meaning that we were going to have rolling blackouts. A brownout went out, and many people's electricity did not come on for days later. A brownout is usually an hour, 2 hours. It didn't come back on. A lot of us were victims. So what am I saying? What am I saying is a lot of the infrastructure that's out here now is not, it doesn't have the capacity to deal with the nuances and the new reality of climate. Case in point, if you're looking at the news over in the UK yesterday reached the hottest they've ever been. We're talking 100, 304 degrees. Temperature that was so high they shut down airports, railroads, the subways. And what did they say about climate control in the UK? They say they weren't ready for it. Why? Because the structures in the UK, if you've ever been there, thick brick buildings, a lot of them don't have air conditioning because it just doesn't get that hot. But this time it got that hot. And you had what they call, these mass warnings of people saying, protect the elderly and things like that. Here in the United States, I want to make something perfectly clear. That people have been put at risk for years in regards to climate change. Okay? Climate change. Meaning that you can look at a meteorological report and figure out in five years from now, you can tell darn near how hot it's going to be. So imagine what they were doing 20 years ago. And what they were doing is looking at it and going, we're not going to do anything. Of course, we had former President Al Gore with The Inconvenient Truth, and it scared you, but it was a movie. The reality is a lot of our spaces, and you're going to find this out, a lot of our spaces, particularly with the African Americans, Latinos, people of color, low-income folks, you're going to find out that the infrastructure is not set up, if you will, for what's coming down the pike in terms of the climate changing. Just the idea of water. If you talk or do some information on water rights, I took a legal class, when I was going for my MBA a couple years ago, and I came up across a case that had to do with water rights. And in looking at this thing about water rights, I was petrified because I expanded the conversation on my own a little bit to understand that people are robbing us of water. People are robbing us of water. The idea of a dam is an extremely scary idea, that you can cut off water to an entire flat of land. That these super turbines that they're doing in Canada, not Canada, but China and places like that, literally rob the Yellow River and the Yangtze River of its natural water. And you say, what is this water being used for? Well, the whole idea is to produce electricity and things like that, but it has devastated China. They don't talk about that. And here in the United States, we're kind of doing the same thing because we're not looking at water rights. The biggest argument right now, and one of the biggest issues that's going to be had in the next 20 years is going to be water rights. Imagine you turn on your spigot and nothing comes out unless you paid an exorbitant amount of money. Have you looked at your water bill lately? Why do we pay for water when water is free? We pay for the right to use the water. Well, now I seem like I'm being condescending. I'm not being condescending. I have to say these things. We pay for the right to use water. Who gave people water rights? If you put a fence around a pond and you can't say I own the pond. If you put a fence around a lake, you can't say I own the lake, but that's exactly what they're doing. And who's the last people to get good water? Us. People like me, people like you, people in the city. And Bilal, anybody can back me up on this. The reason why we're talking about climate control is because we don't have ghettos anymore. Because the ghettos are gone. Gentrification in the city has ushered in a whole nother understanding of climate control. And what that is more so making people comfortable. And the people that they're making comfortable under the auspices of gentrification are the people who could pay for it. Because believe me, the people who are there, when I lived in Washington, D.C., we used to hear about a place called Blue Village or something like that. And what it was, brothers and sisters, it was a water purification plant. And they talked about how it messed up. And so people were getting unclean water in the Washington, D.C. area. And it was only until somebody blew the whistle that people were just drinking the water. Why do you think that's a problem? Why do you think it's a problem? Milwaukee, Wisconsin, several years ago, they had an outbreak. It was called Cryptosporidium. E. coli had gotten into the water system and it poisoned the water reserves going into the city of Milwaukee. Guess where that water went to first? The inner city. And people got sick. Some people with immune deficiencies, they died. But we're not talking about that because we're not putting these things together. So I would like all of us to begin to look at the fact that, A, we now use bottled water. Why do we use bottled water? See, bottled water is not potable water. It's portable water. It means you can take it every place. I grew up at a time when we didn't have portable water. You had a jug of water, a cup of water, but we weren't buying bottles. And what do you think the plastic does? Everybody knows that the plastic damages the economy, the ecosystem. It tears this whole thing up. And what am I saying? It doesn't stop people from using plastic bottles. We talk about recycling. Well, recycling became a joke because people are going, you can't recycle this much plastic. It winds up in the water. It does detriment to the water environment, the water ecosystem. You see what I'm saying, brothers and sisters? As we talk about climate control, what I'm getting more so is there is no climate control. There is no climate control. We have climate realities. Damn, it's hot. Yes, it's hot. You know why? Because the geometric shift in terms of our water. We've been watching the polar ice caps melt for the last 10 years. I'm talking about whole polar ice caps. And it leads to global warming. And those caps going into the water are now not cooling the water. They're falling to the water. The sun heats it up. And now you have exactly what we're doing with now. Exactly what we are dealing with now. The fact that it is burning up. It is burning up. Now, listen, if you live in Texas or Dallas or we're used to seeing hot temperatures. All of us are used to seeing hot temperatures during the summer. But we're not used to seeing temperatures that kill. We're not used to seeing temperatures that alter your life. Several years ago, I had to take an evening flight from Seattle and I had to connect through Phoenix, Arizona. And we couldn't get on the plane in Phoenix, Arizona. You know why? Because they couldn't cool the jet bridge down. They couldn't afford to have people in the jet bridge. And the flight got canceled and I had to leave in the morning. But I'm like, I understand. It's Phoenix, Arizona. The UK, the average temperature during the summer, 70, maybe 73 degrees. They jumped up to 104. Now, we're just talking about these shifts, brothers and sisters, over and over and over again. You see, because the economy has a lot to do with the environment. It does. People don't want to spend to correct their wrongs with the environment. I like to go sometimes and go to Chick-fil-A, right? I like Chick-fil-A in the morning sometimes. And one Chick-fil-A in Maryland, when you get your drink, they give you a paper straw. But another Chick-fil-A, they give you a plastic straw. Two ideologies. One is we're trying to be responsible for the environment. The other one is we don't care, take this plastic straw. And I actually like plastic straws, but I use a paper straw because I understand, hey, we are in a crisis moment. So I just want you to think about that a little bit. I'm going to come back to a couple points before we close. But I want everybody to look up the idea, the concept of an aquifer. I call it aquifer. Aquifer is the actual term. And this is talking about the underwater water supply. that runs underneath the ground, the water supply. And we're going to talk about that. And then I'm going to try and put a nice bow on it as to why we really need to start looking at climate control like today. All right. Look, I'll be back. Don't move. And I'm going to stick with this too. Please, brothers and sisters, COVID is coming. It's here, but it's really coming. And I'm going to say this after the break, but COVID and climate control had a very, very cozy relationship in 2020 and 2021, and it also has one in 2022. We'll be right back.
Hey, babies. Welcome to Radio WCUC, Convenient Urgent Care, home of the smart patient. This is DJ What It Do. You know what time it is. It's the top of the hour, and the request lines are open. You know what you want to hear. I know what you want to hear. Operators are waiting.
I just got to hear Don't Get the COVID.
Don't get the COVID. Put your mask back on. The Delta COVID, more contagious than before. Don't get the COVID. Go on and get the vaccine. You know that it can keep you safe, and your people living up in your space. Don't get the COVID. You need to wash your hands. The Delta COVID is more deadly than before. Don't get the COVID. Go on and get your vaccine. You know that it can keep you from dying. Don't leave your family all alone and crying. Don't get the COVID.
We invite you to join our fight against COVID and against misinformation. It's time to listen to the doctors and trust the science.
When I think of people dying that don't have to die, it makes me sad. Now's the time to be sober. Together we can make this thing over. Let's fight the COVID. Convenient urgent care, home of the smart patient.
So I want to read something from the report I was looking at earlier today. And it's one of there's been a lot of Muslims talking about climate control. We actually had a sister on the show, Indonesian sister, talking about climate control. If you guys remember that show, maybe I'll bring it back on. But this is just African American doctors talking about climate change and its effect on African Americans. A national survey found that 86% of African American doctors believe that climate change is an important issue to address with their patients. Among those who serve in African American communities, the majority said they have seen the harms of climate change in their own patients. The most common health effects reported were injuries from severe storms, floods, and wildfires, worsening of chronic diseases due to air pollution and hotter temperatures, and an increase in allergies due to mold and other exposure. Listen, this is vital. Vital. Heat kills. Heat kills. I remember I was in Milwaukee. They had a heat wave in Chicago. I think 45 people died, and they was so overwrought with people dying in Chicago that they literally bought out refrigerator trucks that they normally hang meat in, and they put the bodies in there because the morgue was overflowed, and they didn't have it. They had to wait. Now, Chicago is not a place that's normally on fire, but it was on fire this particular year going back. Now, if you figure it's on fire 10, 15, 20 years ago, if not more, you have to say, well, what's coming down the road? What is the thing that we need to be looking for? In the inner city, what happened, brothers and sisters, that gentrification moved in, and the impetus of gentrification mean that when people moved in, guess what they didn't do? A lot of them didn't keep the same houses. One, they either tore down the house, built something different that does take into account climate change, or at least healthy environments or healthy community in that area. That was number one. Or two, they got a house, gutted it out, and then they retrofitted it so that it dealt with issues of climate change. My grandmother's house, I love my grandmother, but guess what? It doesn't have any air conditioning. It doesn't. You have a window unit, have a window AC, and that's cool. But window AC doesn't move that air around. Literally, when it gets so hot in a certain area, your cooling unit can't keep up with the rate of the heat. You have to hope that it's going to keep it at 75 or 60. 60 is almost a fallacy these days because it's going to be just ice cold. It's not even realistic to have your house that cold because when it gets hot, the environment wins. And so I want everybody to just kind of begin to look at the pieces here. I'm a longtime lover of Toronto, but I'm going to tell you something. When Toronto gets hot, Altoff, am I lying? When Toronto gets hot, it gets hot. It gets unbearable. You can't hide from the heat in Toronto, and they're on the water. City of Houston, you can't hide from the heat. I don't care what you do, you can't hide from the heat. Your AC in Dallas, Austin, Houston is working overtime. If you don't have a strong AC with some refrigerant, you're in trouble. And God forbid if the AC goes out. My point, brothers and sisters, is it doesn't have to be this way. Yes, we live in climates that are hot, but those climates that are hot should not be infernos. And even looking larger, this is just one inferno. There are a bunch of infernos, and you have to believe that they're connected, that they all have relationships, that there's contagion. Just like in the UK, they had high temperatures. In Spain, they had wildfires. In Portugal, they have wildfires. All these people are dealing with all these things. You ever think about all the time we watch wildfires here in the United States, particularly in California? I'm going to tell you something. If California would have an earthquake right now, it will fall directly into the water. You know why? Because it's brittle. The aquifer is the water, the natural water that runs out, has been drying up for years. Because people siphon it off, because people do things, they toxify the water. I mean, we're going to be like Saudi Arabia here in a minute doing salination plants, doing salination setups, putting up screens, kept the dew off these big screens, and it comes down. That's how we're going to capture our water if we're not careful. We still haven't even talked about water rights, which to me is an oxymoron. Who has a right to water? Normally, I say, who has a right to water? And that says I have to look at the author and the maker of water. Who has a patent on water? God has a patent on water. But you got fools here now who are saying, no, we control the water. And they're doing a poor job of it. So in the wrap up, let me say this, and then I'm going to bounce. Do that homework. Find out who has your water rights, okay? Because water rights is the thing that they're going to be looking at the next couple of years. So when you go to these city council meetings and stuff like that, they're making crucial decisions about the quality of your water, the quality of your life. Don't look at the politicians. They're already corrupt. Look at some of the policies that are matriculating down, and some of these people are rallying around and pushing through. Our losses a lot of times in terms of our freedom to move, our freedom to address a lot of things that are going on in our community is the fact that we're looking at regional politicians and national politicians, and we're not addressing local politicians, local politics. Like I said, damn, it's hot. Why is it hot? Because we've done a darn good job of tearing up this environment and this climate, and it's going to be as hot as it can be till we change. If we can change at all, and if we can change in time. All right, listen, that's the show for today. You guys have been amazing. A shout out to Us Hub. Shout out to Islamic Relief USA. Shout out to BeFinancialIndependent.com. Shout out to, of course, Bayan Islamic Graduate School. And shout out to my people, Convenient Urgent Care. Listen, we're gone. See you tomorrow. Hope you guys have a blessed day. Stay cool. This is your brother, Preacher Moss. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.